Okay, so as Diego mentioned, my name is Sofía Pérez-Guzmán. I am a current PhD candidate and a graduate research assistant at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. We are in upstate New York, near Albany, if you're familiar with the area. And today the talk I'm gonna give you is about behavioral economics in disaster management. And for this talk, here's the dynamic that I want to have. I'm going to give you some concepts, but I want you to participate with me. I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions. For these questions, you can unmute yourself and just give your answers, or you can just type them into chat. It's okay. I'm also going to ask you to fill a survey with a couple of games that we're going to be playing. So that will happen as well. And at any time, just please interrupt me if you have questions. That's okay. So let's get started. Okay, so let's first talk about how do people make decisions in general. What is the thinking process? What happens that leads to someone making a decision? So there is a theory in economics, traditional economics, consumer theory. This theory pretty much is interested in understanding how is it that consumers behave. Consumers, well, we can just generalize this. How is it that people in general make decisions? And they have a fundamental assumption, and it is that people make choices based on what they value the most. And this is actually called utility maximization. And what utility maximization says is that consumers or people in general act based on maximizing their own well-being. And well-being in these terms means also utility or any kind of benefit, or even like a negative or like some sort of disutility that you may perceive. And you are also, this decision, this utility maximization is usually always subject to constraints. Which types of constraints? Income, prices in the market, the information that you have available, time, so on and so forth. So let's try to put this into a little bit of more context. Suppose that you are making a choice. What are you going to eat? You're deciding between pizza and a burger. Let's say that you like pizza more than a burger. So in that case, we call that the utility of this item, pizza, it's higher than the utility of burger. And this utility is subjective. This utility, each individual has a different utility. So in that case, in which your utility is higher for pizza than a burger, then we say, we could just write it this way mathematically. If the utility of A is larger than the utility of B, then you strictly prefer A over B. So if this is the case, that you definitely like more pizza than burger, and I present you with the choice, what do you choose? Well, you choose a pizza, right? Your utility is larger. So this is how, according to traditional economics, people make decisions. Now, how do we model utility? We use economic models. We use models. Pretty much a mathematical representation in which we use variables, input variables, and they determine an output variable. So in traditional economics, as I mentioned, where we use utility maximization, there is a very fundamental assumption. It is that people are rational. I'm pretty sure you have heard this before many times. What does it mean that people are rational? These are some of the examples. It means that you treat, or rational people treat gains and losses symmetrically. For you, gaining $50 is equivalent as losing $50. It also means that whatever plan that you make, you follow it exactly as you planned it. There are no deviations from your plans. It also means that you update your beliefs according to the rules of probability. It also means that you act in your own best interest. You don't care about anyone else. You just care about your interest. And it also means that your mental capacity is unlimited, meaning that it doesn't matter if you have been working for the entire day, you are extremely tired, you always have the same capacity to make decisions and the same capacity to process all the information and make decisions, make the right decisions. And it also means that every time you make decisions, you think them through. You take all the information, process that, and get to a decision. These are the assumptions of rationality. So here's the first question. Remember, I told you I was going to be asking you questions, and I want you to participate. Do you believe that these assumptions always hold in reality? And this moment, you can unmute yourself, talk, and just type it in the chat. Yes, no, maybe. Do these assumptions hold? Great, I see a couple of no's in the chat. Ooh, it seems like we have consensus. Yes?
Just curious, why do we have all these assumptions?
It's just the assumptions of the standard economic models. The traditional economists who once said, let's use this model to determine how do people make decisions, these were the assumptions that they used then.
Thanks.
Well, so before we get to answer the question if these assumptions always hold, I want to play the first game with you. So I am presenting right now what we call a gamble or a lottery. I need you to choose one of them. You can type it in the chat if you want. What do you prefer? To receive now $100 or to receive $120 in a week? See a couple of B's. On the Diego, you can also participate if you want. It depends. I see an A. Okay, great. So now here's another one. What do you prefer? Do you prefer to receive $100 in 4 weeks, or do you prefer to receive $120 in 5 weeks? One A, B, B, A. Great. So let me first tell you something. I don't know if you noticed, but in this case, we have that the alternatives are equivalent. In game 1 and game 2, A is equal to A, B is equal to B. So it happens that people in the first game prefer A over B, but in the second game, they prefer B over A. So why would that happen? Why would there be a mismatch if the alternatives are equivalent? It is exactly the same to receive 100 now that instead of 120 in a week, than receiving 100 in 4 weeks, than 120 in 5 weeks. Why would there be a mismatch? So here's the answer for you. People in general are impatient. They are impatient when they have to make a decision related to a choice that you have to make now versus something in the near future. Their impatience, of course, there, but when they have to make a future decision between two options that occur both in the future, then there is no impatience. So actually, this is first of like this here, we have a first mismatch of the traditional economics model. Traditional economics would predict that the best solution, rational people would always choose B over A, because in general you just don't find interest rates are as high as to give you like such a performance in a short period of time. So in general, rational people would always choose B over A. So there is a field that is called behavioral economics, and it is what I want to talk to you about today. Behavioral economics appeared after traditional economics when these economists were trying to figure out why is it that we can find so many examples of behaviors that do not match the traditional choice models, the standard economic model. So traditional economic models we just saw, they usually fail in some of these cases. First of all, they failed in predicting the heuristics that people use to make choices. What are these heuristics? Heuristics are pretty much rules of thumbs or any sort of resource that you use to make a decision easier to make. And an example of this is, for instance, status quo bias. And in status quo bias, we observe that people have the tendency to prefer choices that are default. So whenever you're presented with a choice that is not really a choice, that it is a default, but your choice is to like not use that default option, then people tend to just leave the default option, don't think about it. So that is a heuristic, something that makes your life easier when you're making a decision. And then under this decision-making process, there are three cases in which traditional economics models fail. First, choice over time. So when you have to make a selection and time is involved, for instance, when you decide to procrastinate, traditional economics fails at that. Instead of procrastinating, most of the times you should just get done whatever you have to get done. Still, you procrastinate. When you're choosing under risk, so there's a really nice example with this. It is the gambler's fallacy. People tend to believe that when an event has occurred before many times, like if you roll a dice and you always get a 666, then you tend to believe that there is a higher probability of getting another 6, while in reality that is not the case. It's just random. And also when there is choice under uncertainty, meaning that you don't know what is the probability of an event occurring. For instance, when people invest in the stock market, they really don't know what is the probability of the value of the stocks going up or down. They just make a decision. So heuristics in general are what help people make decisions more easily with less effort. And now behavioral economics or traditional economic models also fail when modeling risk preferences. And there is a case for this. We have risk aversion, which you may be familiar with that term. We're gonna dig into it in a moment. And it also fails, traditional economic models also fail with social preferences. And for instance, they fail to explain why is it that people donate to charity. For this, to understand this quote unquote irrational behavior that the traditional economic models tend to fail, there is a tool called behavioral experiments, which are in fact some of the games that you're going to be playing today with me. So why is this important for disaster management, and why am I even talking about this in this class? I want you to answer this question later. So I just wanted to keep to think about it, and everything that I'm gonna say from now on is going to be related to the answer of this question. So just keep it in your mind. Let's now play another game. Here's the game. You have 100 boxes. They are closed. You don't know what is inside them. 99 of them contain $10 and 1 contains a bond. So you're going to decide how many boxes are you going to open, and you earn whatever amount of money you collect in those boxes that you open. But if you happen to open the one that has the box, then you don't earn anything, you lose everything. So I want you to answer this question: how many boxes do you want to open? You not necessarily have to type it in the chat box, just keep an answer in your head. I'm gonna give you like 2 seconds to think about it. How many boxes do you want to open? Okay, so I hope everyone has their answer. Now, I'm just gonna ask, did you choose less than 50 boxes? The number that you decided to open, was it less than 50 boxes? Well, let me tell you that suggests that you are a risk-averse person. Remember, we're going to talk about this in a moment. If you chose exactly 50, then we could say that you're a risk-neutral person. But if you chose more than 50, then we can say that you're a risk-seeking person. So this is a behavioral experiment. It helps us measure, quantify all this kind of quote unquote irrational behavior. So So now I want to talk to you about risk preferences. That is what that game is for. It helps us measure risk preferences. And when we talk about risk aversion, we are talking about, or when a person is risk averse, it's a person that usually tends to avoid risky situations. Whenever they have to make a choice, they prefer the choice that has less risk involved, even if the outcome of the choice the expected outcome in terms of probabilities it's larger than whatever he's choosing. So when we say that when we have a risk-averse person, this person perceives a very high dissatisfaction from a loss, that this dissatisfaction is way larger than whatever satisfaction they would perceive from the equivalent gain. And this, we can model it with a utility function that looks like this. So I was earlier telling you about utility functions. You would not necessarily have to get into the details, the math or anything like that. But I just wanted to show you how a risk-averse function, the utility function of a risk-averse person looks like. In general, they simply tend to value higher the losses than the gains. And now if we think of the other two types of risk preferences, then the risk neutral would simply be a linear function, and then in the risk seeking, we have a function that as the outcome, as the amount that you're evaluating gets larger, the utility gets larger way faster. So how can we measure risk preferences? I showed you the game of the bomb, but there are other tools that we can use. This is another game that we can use. So for instance, I can present you with this lottery. Suppose that you have the 50% chance of winning $10 and 50% chance of winning $0. And then you have another lottery, an X dollars with 100% chance. So what would be that X for you? What is the X that makes you indifferent between either playing the first lottery or playing the second lottery? So that is a tool that helps us measure risk preferences, and that X in this case, we call it willingness to pay. And if this willingness to pay in this case for this game is less than 5, then you're risk averse. It's equal to 5 is risk neutral, and it's greater than 5 is risk seeking. And for this, we just have to compute the expected probability outcomes, and it helps us measure these risk preferences. So these are the type of tools that in behavioral economics we would use to measure this type of things, and they simply do not follow the traditional economics model. So, as I mentioned before, another field in which the traditional economics fail are social preferences. So, because the standard economic model assumes that people are selfish, they only care about whatever they consume, about their own utility. So, what behaviors do not fit this? Well, several behaviors. This is just a short list, but there are more than this. We have altruism, sense of fairness, reciprocity, envy, aversion to inequality. All these behaviors and more simply do not fit the fact that people are selfish. Sometimes people are not selfish. Sometimes they perceive their utility is larger when they, for instance, donate to charity. They feel better when they are doing a pro-social behavior, when they're helping others. So the behavioral economics helps us measure these social preferences that in theory are irrational. So now we're gonna play another game, some games. And for this ones, I want you to answer a Google form. This is the code. You can scan it with your phone, or you can also use the link there. I think I can also send it through the chat in a moment. But anyway, I just want to say that you're going to read a couple of scenarios, a couple of games, and all of them talk about prize money. This is all hypothetical, but I want you to play as if you were actually going to win this prize money. So please go ahead and scan the code. Let me get the link to paste it there, and then I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to fill it. And maybe you can raise your hand in You can raise your hand in Zoom when you're done.
The third game is a little bit confusing to me.
Yes. In the third game, you do have a specific question? Do you want me to explain?
Well, maybe if you want to explain, that would be easier.
Great. In the third game, you are presented with a game, with a collaboration game. You have a given amount of money that we give you, and then you have to determine how much of that money will you collaborate to the team effort. The team will invest all the money that they collect in an investment opportunity, and I give you the rate of return. So at the end, whatever you earn is whatever you did not invest with your group, and whatever everyone collected and they obtained as a return, and then you split between all of you. I don't know if that was more confusing.
Yeah.
I see we have two responses.
Left.
David said he was done. Is anyone else still completing the game, or is everyone done?
I'm done.
I need just another minute. Okay, I completed mine now.
Perfect, thank you. Now just give me 1 minute to compile it. Perfect. I think you are seeing my screen now and you are hearing me correct. Okay, thank you for completing this for me. Really appreciate it. So the first two games that you played are actually called the dictator game. In this game, you were put in a task of dividing a fixed amount of money. This game is usually played by two people. In this case, all of you did the role of one of the players, the proposer. So you were the dictator, the ones who determined the split. So now I want to ask all of you, same as before, you can type it in the chat, but I think it would be easier if you unmute yourselves. How does this game connect with social preferences? What are your thoughts? Any idea? Any guess?
I think it all depends on the actual area of thought. Playing a game knowing that you're not really getting the money helps with splitting it fairly or giving them more. But if you actually got the $100 in your hand and then had to determine based off of your circumstances, if you owe bills, if you were hungry, and the other things that you may be going through, you may change your perspective or how much you would give the other person, depending on also their circumstances. So if they actually need it more than you, you may give it up based off if you already had.
Wilson, right?
Right.
Thank you for your intervention. Everything you said is so correct. You mentioned so many details that are important and that I want to talk to you about. But yes. Let me touch on that in a moment, on everything that you said. Thank you for your intervention. I am reading here in the chat box that greed, power, if you know decision, it affects your decision. You have more pressure to split evenly if you're gonna see that person again. Loyalty, that is close to the answer that I was looking for. This game, this experiment helps us actually measure altruism. It helps us, because it allows you, the proposers, to make a choice on how do you split. You're not expecting another decision from your opponent in this game. You're not playing strategically, you're just splitting money. It gives you a chance of making a pro-social decision. What would be a pro-social decision? Share the money. I mean, you could easily just keep all the prize for yourself. There's no need to share it. The game is anonymous. I'm not recording your answers. You don't know who are you playing with. So yes, it helps us measure altruism. So these are your results. I'm sorry, the graphs look a little bad, but in the first game, you were just playing with some random person, and here I was actually targeting what Wilson mentioned. I wanted to play with the fact that you don't know the person at all, that it is an strange individual. So it's interesting that your results, actually like 71% of you decided to give 50% or like keep 50, the amount, the half of the amount. We observed that some other people decided to keep the most of it. And what is more interesting about it is that when we see the second game, in the second game, the difference with the first game was that we told you that this time you were going to play with a classmate. So it's actually what Wilson was mentioning and what Nancy also commented. If you know the person, if you know the individual, and that is a variation, that is a factor that impacts a lot, then you're more willing to share. Look, for instance, whomever answered that he would keep 75, he actually did not do that. And we observed that more people now decided to split evenly. So this helps us measure altruism, but also what we're just discussing, the results can just vary. There are so many factors. There can be framing, we're going to see it in a moment. There can be anonymity, like if you don't know who are you giving it to. If you actually play this game multiple times, you may start to change your decision, and in general, so many other factors that can affect. But this is a classic experiment that can help us determine how altruistic people are, how much are they willing to give to others. Remember that in this game, you could have just kept everything for yourself. So this actually starts to show us, I understand that the flaw of this game is that you're not actually receiving the money, and that is true. Thank you, Wilson. If you were receiving this money, most likely results would be different. Most likely the results would be more towards higher than 50. You would keep more than 50% of the price. We would see more selfish results. But in general, it starts to show us that people are not necessarily rational. They don't behave rational as predicted by the standard economic model. So I just wanted to show you this result of a variation of the dictator game. It was presented in a journal paper by Eckel and Grossman, and what they found was that they played this game twice. First, the recipient was a random person, anonymous, and then in the second game, the recipient was a charity recipient. And we observed that when we change that, when we actually tell people that they are playing this game with a charity, with someone from charity, then they start sharing more. We observe in the x-axis that the amount that they kept, they could keep from 10 to 0. The percent of individuals that kept all of it, 10, was less when there was a charity recipient. So people are more, we could say that people are more altruistic when they know to whom they are giving. And for instance, if you just tell them it is for charity, they could even be more altruistic. So now the third game that you played, it's called the public goods game. This is the one that Diego was asking me about. In this game, you were put in a group, and each of the group members had to contribute to a group project, and everyone was receiving the same amount of money, and you could choose how much you wanted to contribute to the group project. So it is very important that you note that your final earnings were going to depend also not only on the amount that you kept for yourself, because you could have kept the entire price, the 100 for yourself, but it was also going to depend on the total earnings of the investment. But if you were the single person investing, no one else was investing, then imagine that you invested $100, you're left with nothing. If no one else invests, then you earn money, but you have to split it between everyone. That is something that could have crossed your mind. So what do you expect the results to look like? I'm just going to jump in and actually show you the results. These are your results. This is the amount that you collaborated. So actually, you can see there's more variation. That our sample size is small, but most of the people decided to collaborate 100% of the price. When you play this game when you play it repeatedly, it is very interesting because you start seeing that your results will converge to the optimal. And what is the optimal in this case? What is the social optimal in this case? That everyone invests everything. And if everyone invests everything, that is the highest amount of earnings that absolutely everyone could get. And that is something that you don't think about. So if you were rational individuals, everyone would have invested the $100. But this is a game, and in reality, this is how it happens. This is strategy. You don't know what others are going to do. There are so many expectations. So these are your results. There is a very interesting paper on this topic. These authors were studying the conditional contribution game. The one that you played was unconditional. They played the conditional one. So in the first game, they played the same that you played, the unconditional one. But in the second game, the interesting one, they had a contribution table, and they were asked to say how much would they contribute if the rest of the team, the average contributions were certain amounts. So for all possible average amounts of contributions of the rest of the group, they were asked to say how much would they contribute. So they found this results. I know it is a little messy when you see it the first time, but pretty much in the x-axis, you have the average contribution of the group. And in the y-axis, you have what the person reported, what the people reported that they would contribute based on the average. So for instance, if I told you, well, the average of the group contributed 100 of the prize, it is very likely that you would have said, oh, well, I would contribute 100 of the price. Or on the other side, you could have said, or suppose that I say the average contribution is 0, no one has contributed anything, then most likely your answer is going to be that you're not going to contribute. Why are you going to contribute? Everyone's going to be benefiting from you, and you're going to be in a bad situation. So this is what it shows. The bold line shows the total average of the contributions, of the individual contributions based on the average contribution. And because this total average is increasing, it means that the more others contribute to a cause, the more you are going to contribute. So this is conditional contribution. So for instance, just to make an example, it clicked on me when I heard it. Suppose that you live with more people in your house and no one cleans the house. Would you clean the house? Do you feel the desire, the will to clean the house? Most likely not. Suppose that everyone in your house is like very committed to the cause of cleaning, and every, I don't know, Sunday they're cleaning the house. It is more likely then that because everyone else is doing it, you feel compelled to also do your part. So this is conditional contribution. And then from here, we also, something very interesting that we find is types of contributors. We have people, the free riders, the people that definitely they are selfish. This is what traditional economics predicts should happen. Why would you contribute when you can just free ride the system, when you can just take advantage, keep the 100 for yourself, but get the earnings from the group project? And there are people that are like that, free riders. But then we observed that a lot of people, actually, most of them, 50% of the sample were conditional cooperators, which is this line here that with the squares. So this is a very interesting research on that topic. And then the last two games that you played are a donation game. In this game, I presented you with I gave you $100, and you were asked to donate if you wanted to some charity. descriptions. And the difference between the first and the second game was that in the first game, I told you that it was just gonna, that the recipients would be like 26 million children. You didn't know in reality who was the recipient. In the second game, I told you Jimmy, who is only 12 years old. So you know, you can identify a person from this cause that you're donating. So now at this time, I just want to ask you, what do you think is going to be the difference in the results in this case?
I'm going to assume that for the first case, it'll not be as much money, but whenever you characterize like a person for the second case, more money will be donated.
Thank you, look, that is correct. Let's see, how are your results? These are your results. Here I don't have the average, but let me try to see from the graphs, from the results, where the averages. Yes, so in the game where you did not identify who the victim was, we observed that there were more people that were just donating like very little amounts. There's not actually that much of variation actually that I could have predicted. The differences is that in the first one, the people donated 51 in average. In the second one, they donated 54. Difference is not too high, but in general, we observe what Luke mentioned. And this is called the identifiable victim effect. The identifiable victim effect says that when you are making a decision, you have the tendency to feel more empathy towards an individual that you can not even relate to, but a single individual than a general group that where no one is mentioned. And what are the consequences of this? The consequences are that if your decisions are affected by empathy, it could happen that you don't process all the information that is available to make a better decision. It could happen that it is maybe better to donate to a larger cause than a single individual. More people could be more benefited than if you donate to one person. So I just have one last game to you. In this one, you can just answer it in your mind. In this game, let's say that the US is preparing for the outbreak of a disease, and it's going to kill, it's expected that it's going to kill 600 people. So you have to choose which program to adopt for this disease. And if you adopt the program A, then you will save 200 people. If you adopt program B, then you will save 600 people with 1/3 probability, or you will not save absolutely anyone with 2/3 probability. So I want you to choose which of the programs would you prefer. You can type it in the chat if you want. I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to think about it. Then I'm going to go to another question. So now, here's the other question I have. Suppose that now you cannot use program A and B, you have program C and D. In program C, 600 people are going to die with a probability of 2/3. And no one is going to die with a probability of 1/3. And in program D, 400 people are going to die. So which of them are you going to choose? Christy, there's no A. This one is C and D, or unless you were answering the previous one. Okay, so here's the catch. I see your answers are still coming, but we may run short in time. So here's the catch. Program A was equivalent to program D, and program B was equivalent to program C. Why did most people choose A over B in the first one, but in the second one, they chose C over D? Same as before, this does not follow the standard economic model. Why did this happen? Framing effect, another concept. Framing effect says that when you make a decision, you rely on how the information is presented. In the first game, I told you people are going, the amount of people that you were going to save. In the second one, I told you the amount of people that were going to die. The alternatives were the same, but one seems more catastrophic than the other one, and that influenced the decision that you made. And what are the consequences of this? You could use it like for a good purpose, for a bad purpose, but if you use it for a bad purpose, then you could obtain suboptimal decisions. And I didn't talk about this in the previous effect, in the identifiable victim effect, but this is a way that can be used to influence public opinion in a good or bad way. So there is another effect that I wanted to discuss, herd mentality and bandwagon effect. And for this one, I just wanted to ask you, imagine that you are selecting a restaurant, you're walking on a street you've never been to, you don't know any of the restaurants. You see that one of them is packed and you see that the other one is empty. Which one would you choose? You have no other information. It is really likely that your answer is going to be that you're going to choose the full one. Why? That is the only information that is available. And this is the herd mentality and bandwagon effect. People tend to make decisions based on what others are, the others' decisions, the decisions that others are making. And they sometimes, in this case of the restaurant, they did not give you more information, but sometimes they just ignore other information that is available. And these decisions, once again, tend to be suboptimal. And sometimes the right decision is not the popular one. And you can see that in many realms, in many aspects. And the last effect that I wanted to share with you is the effect heuristic. This one is basically that people tend to rely on the emotions when they make decisions that are urgent. And this can lead to poor decisions. And an example of this is used, and it is a positive example of this, positive use of this effect. And the anti-smoking campaigns, they appeal to the people's emotions, so that when they see the images of what smoking does to you, then they simply decide to not do it. So I presented you with this question at the beginning: why are these concepts important for disaster management? I hope that these ideas gave you enough tools to answer this. And just because we're running short of time, just want to show you 3 more slides and then we can jump into questions. I just wanted to show you 2 very interesting sources that I found where they use behavioral economics in disaster management. And this first one is a report from the World Bank. It's used in disaster preparedness. And in this report, basically, they wanted to improve the early warning systems to enable people to evacuate before there is a hurricane. And for this, they used a behavioral approach. Why? They identified there were many behavioral barriers that limited the evacuation process. So some of the findings, just to give you a pick, but it would be great if you want to take a look to this report. Some of the findings were that when people received the evacuation messages, usually they did not understand the messages. The language was not clear. Usually they simply did not trust the source of it. They could think that the intentions were other. Sometimes the messages didn't even say what the person had to do. And also it happened that the messengers, that the responders lacked training in how to make people act in certain ways, how to make people evacuate. They also found that what we were talking about, people tend to underestimate risk. People are in denial that there is going to happen, that there's going to pass a hurricane through their house. People are fatalist about if there's going to be a hurricane, well, I'm just going to stay here because it's the end of the world. Or people have myopic behaviors, which we discussed this at the very beginning. They tend to prefer the outcomes of a short-term decision. They tend to prefer staying at home, protect their goods, rather than thinking on the long-term decisions or the long-term impacts of their decisions, which is I have to evacuate, leave everything behind because it's more important that I stay alive rather than evacuating, rather than leaving my things behind. And then the other source that I wanted to share with you was in disaster response. In this paper, the authors created an aid memoir that helped managing cognitive biases in the case of this of emergency management, and this is what it looks like, what they produced. And we see here that they propose to ask some questions to the disaster respondents so that they are sure to overcome their biases. And I just want to highlight this last one, which is on one of the biases that we saw today, the bandwagon effect. And here he's just asking the respondent if he's just agreeing with a plan, with a response plan, because others are agreeing, or if he's actually considering alternatives, all the information that is available that doesn't support the dominant decision. So this is a really interesting paper as well. And